This video is the first in a series of videos focused on modern happiness studies. This series will begin by focusing on the Journal of Happiness Studies. As the first video in this direction, it will discuss the founding of the Journal of Happiness Studies, its goals, and the articles within the first issue. Future videos within this series will focus on specific themes within modern happiness studies, and on the genealogy of modern happiness studies. The Journal of Happiness Studies is relatively young. It was founded in the year 2000 by three researchers, Ed Diener, Alex Michalos, and Ruut Veenhoven. Ed Diener is an American psychologist who has taught at the universities of Utah, Virginia, and Illinois. He's also a senior scientist with Gallup. He has published numerous articles and several books, including Happiness, Unlocking the Mysteries of Psychological Wealth, Well-Being and Public Policy, International Differences in Well-Being, among others. Alex Michalos is a professor emeritus of political science at the University of Northern British Columbia. He has published numerous articles in various publications and edited the Encyclopedia of Quality of Life and Well-Being Research in 2014. Ruut Veenhoven is a Dutch sociologist. He is the founder of the World Database of Happiness and has published numerous articles on a variety of themes within happiness studies. I've put links in the description to relevant books and pages. They have each done some interviews online about their research. These videos are worth watching and might be covered in another video. In the editorial of the first issue, they describe the journal as an interdisciplinary forum on subjective well-being. They add that it covers both cognitive appraisal of life and affective enjoyment of life. Yet they go on to say quite clearly that the journal does not cover everything ever associated with the terms happiness, quality of life, or well-being. The various meanings of these words are delineated in the first paper of this first issue, which distinguishes 4 qualities of life. This journal includes only one of these, the one named appreciation of life. This raises the question, what do the founders of the Journal of Happiness Studies mean by happiness? And what don't they mean? The 4 qualities of life. In the first article of the journal, Ruut Veenhoven divides quality of life into 4 components and explains why it is that the Journal of Happiness Studies ought to focus on appreciation or appraisal of life in particular. This is partially an exercise in clarifying the language which is used to discuss happiness. Terms such as quality of life, well-being, health, happiness, and welfare are often thrown about in reference to the same things. The lack of agreement over the specific meanings of these terms warranted, in Veenhoven's view, an analysis of quality of life in an attempt to clarify this journal's intentions. Veenhoven divides quality of life using 2 binary categories, life chances and life results, and outer qualities and inner qualities. Veenhoven borrows this scheme from similar conceptualizations used in biology, economics, and systems theory. In biology, life chances can be divided into the outer life chances, or the environment in which the organism exists, and the inner life chances, or that animal's fitness. Similarly, life results can be divided into the outer life results, that is the continuation of the species, but also into the inner life results, which would be the internal experience had by the individual organism. The life results are dependent in large degree upon both the environment to which the individual is born and its own biological fitness. A similar model is used in economics to describe the movement of the economy. The market, which an individual finds themselves within, and the amount of capital they possess, describes the chances of success within that economy. The quality of the market and of the available capital influences the creation or destruction of public and private wealth. Veenhoven's model divides quality of life into 4 quadrants in a similar way. Veenhoven divides the chances into livability and life ability. Livability refers to those ways in which the society a person lives in affects the probability that individuals living within that society can attain happiness. This includes the ecology, social conditions, economic conditions, and the culture which persists within that society. Life ability refers to those internal qualities which determine the likelihood that an individual will be able to attain happiness. These include physical and mental health, knowledge, skills, and what Veenhoven calls the art of living. The utility of life refers to the external effects of a life. This would include the degree to which an individual contributes to their society. It might also manifest morally or aesthetically. This might be seen most clearly in philosophical conceptions of the good. Socrates, for example, might have determined the utility of a life by the individual's virtue. In the same way, the utilitarians might measure the utility of a life by the amount of pleasure they experienced and caused. Veenhoven notes that this category is likely impossible to measure, because both the criteria and those who would judge are multifarious. He also states that this quadrant is typically the playground of philosophers. The fourth quadrant which Veenhoven describes is subjective appreciation of life, and it is this category which the founders of the Journal of Happiness Studies believe ought to be used to assess quality of life. Why does the Journal of Happiness Studies prioritize subjective appreciation of life over, say, the life ability of individuals or the life chances of a society? Veenhoven's reasoning is mainly practical. As a measure of happiness, subjective appreciation of life is easier to measure, though it must be done through self-assessment, and that leads to its own set of problems. But it is even more difficult to assess the impact of the chances, both life chances and life ability, upon happiness without some sort of metric. Veenhoven has noted elsewhere that no physiological correlate to happiness has yet been found, and so self-reporting is simply the best we can do. This reasoning has led to the formation of the Subjective-Wellbeing set of survey questions. It involves asking participants to rate their own happiness on a variety of scales. Other measures have emerged with similar aims. One particularly popular measure is the life satisfaction set of survey questions. But what does this suggest about the content of the Journal of Happiness Studies? The editorial suggestion that the journal is not concerned with the life chances or with the utility of life was perhaps misleading. It seems to be that the Journal of Happiness Studies is interested not only in subjective well-being, but also upon the effect of the various life chances upon subjective well-being. Hence, many of the articles within the Journal of Happiness Studies consist of a similar structure. They compare on the one hand a measure of self-reported well-being against a variety of items, and attempt in this manner to discover firstly what measures affect subjective well-being and the degree of the effect. The second article in the Journal of Happiness Studies discusses one of the principal debates within the happiness literature, that is, the variation in subjective well-being which exists between nations. This map was put together by the Washington Post, using data from the UN-sponsored World Happiness Report. The nations in blue are the happiest. The nations in red are the least happy. Surveys of happiness reveal different average levels of happiness in different nations. What accounts for the variation in responses? While this article frames the problem at the national level, it explores theories which are used to explain other discrepancies within the happiness literature. These theories attempt to describe the process which an individual undergoes when they report their happiness. The first theory discussed is need fulfillment. This theory suggests that there is a set of universal needs which are considered when an individual evaluates their happiness. Need fulfillment theory suggests that it is possible to determine those needs by cataloging and isolating survey responses. Diener and Lucas point to a sizable body of evidence in support of this theory. They point firstly to a review of the happiness literature done by Ruut Veenhoven, the author of the previous article, where he suggests that a substantial amount of the variance can be accounted for by objective conditions. Factors such as income, nutrition, equality, freedom, and education can account for 77% of the variance in national happiness. The second theory regarding variation in self-reported happiness is relative standards theory, which suggests that individuals rate their happiness by comparing their objective conditions with other possible conditions. This means that individuals might compare their conditions with their own past conditions, to the conditions of other people, or even to imagined conditions. Diener and Lucas point to a particularly large body of literature which supports this theory. They point out some research done by Dermer, which suggests that people rated their own life satisfaction as higher when they had read a negative description of history, whereas they rated their life satisfaction as lower when they read a positive description of history. In another example, researchers surveyed persons with spinal cord injuries. They found that time since injury was a positive predictor of general satisfaction. Research on incarceration and bereavement indicate a similar trend. This also alludes to the concept of emotional adaptation. This is the idea that people's emotional states adapt to changes in their objective conditions. This means that individuals tend to adjust to negative changes and to positive changes. This process has been referred to by Brickman and Campbell as the hedonic treadmill. Another theory which Diener and Lucas consider is culture theory, or the theory that much of who we are, what we think and feel, and how we act is determined by the culture in which we live. Yet Diener and Lucas point to a very scant body of evidence for this theory. They even present original research here in an attempt, it seems, to bolster the scant evidence. They surveyed college students from 41 different nations to quantify the ideal life satisfaction and their own life satisfaction. They found that their reported life satisfaction was highly correlated with their ideal life satisfaction and with their level of wealth. They also point to research done by Su, which indicates that emotions played less of a role in life satisfaction judgments among collectivists than it did among individualists. The small amount of evidence provided here does not indicate that the cultural explanation is wrong. It merely indicates that in 2000, when this article was published, the authors of this particular article lacked examples. More evidence has been presented in the Journal of Happiness Studies since that time. In 2001, two researchers indicated that materialistic cultures are less happy than spiritualistic cultures. In 2002, a researcher indicated that among Christians, spirituality was most significantly related to happiness, while among Jews, congregational support was most significantly related to happiness. Evaluation theory is the last theory explored by Diener and Lucas. It is a sort of internal theory and a theory of compromise which they suggest unifies the other theories. They suggest that individuals evaluate their subjective well-being based on only a small part of the information available to them. Because some conditions are fleeting and others are chronic, the chronic conditions will have more stable impact on subjective well-being scores. This would indicate that the meeting of needs, automatized cultural scripts for evaluation, and how well one is doing at one's goals are likely to be accessible much of the time, while momentary, situational factors are likely to influence mood at a particular moment, but are less likely to influence average levels of mood over time. This theory is partly a justification of the utility of subjective well-being surveys in evaluating happiness. It implies that subjective well-being surveys passively capture the fulfillment of needs, the manifestation of cultural norms, and the process of comparison. What does all of this mean about the direction of modern happiness studies? Modern happiness studies have been influenced by several trends in modern thinking. The Journal of Happiness Studies marks a distinct attempt to study happiness scientifically. They're not the first group to make such an attempt. The utilitarians claimed as much as early as 1823. Jeremy Bentham, for instance, attempted to construct a formula for maximizing happiness. But the journal is part of a much wider field of social science research. The journal benefits from 177 years of scientific advancement, but also from a greater number of social science researchers who have been working during that time. The journal's founders note that at the time of this journal's founding, there were already 1,679 social scientific journals. What sets apart the Journal of Happiness Studies is not simply the attempt to study happiness scientifically, but rather that advanced knowledge and the immediate awareness of the need to operationalize happiness. Hence the great focus by the journal's founders on clarifying the definition of happiness and the reliance of self-reported subjective well-being as a metric.